Good morning, afternoon, evening everyone, and welcome back to the Genshin Impact character review series, where we take a look at each character from the game. I give my opinions on them, so we review them, we take a look at their skills, talk about artifacts, weapons and such. It is a review. So then, today's character is the walnut herself, Hu Tao. Who? So, Hu Tao is a Pyro Polearm 5-star character that is very famous for being one of the top DPSs, especially the top single target DPS, and indeed, she is absolutely crazy. Anything just doesn't stand a chance in front of Hu Tao. But, that's a general, look. Let's dive deeper into Hu Tao's kit and see why is she so powerful. So, starting off with the auto attacks, they are very beautiful in animation. You will use them. So unlike other pole arms that have nice and fancy animations, you will use Hu Tao's auto attacks because she's your main DPS is a hyper carry. They're nice and beautiful. Also, her charge attack is the skewer type, which is very interesting actually, because basically all 5-star pole arms except for Hu Tao have a special charge attack. Zhongli has his special spears that fall into a line. Xiao has his claw charge attack. Raiden has her moon charge attack, and Hu Tao is the only character that has the skewer, which is shared with most, well, if not all, 4-star characters. So it's very interesting why they didn't give her a special charge attack animation. I mean, when it comes to gameplay, we will see later, it does fit well, but again, very interesting how a 5-star polearm, she's the unique one that doesn't have a special charge attack animation. So, next, before we move on to the skill, I also want to mention Hu Tao's dash. She's actually one of the few characters that had a kind of special dash. It's mostly an animation thing. It's not like Mona or Ayaka where they have the alternate sprint. It's an animation where she vanishes for a bit at the start of the dash and then reappears. The thing is that this dash reminds me of something, but I just can't put my finger on it. Well, it's fine, right? So then, moving on to Hu Tao's skill. So this is the big one. So when you activate Hu Tao's skill, you infuse her weapon with Pyro, and also take a big chunk of HP out of Hu Tao. And then you gain an attack increase based on your max HP. It is specifically an attack increase. You will see numbers go up. It's not a general damage increase. So attack bonuses can actually help increase Hu Tao's damage from artifacts or supports. But this is the really big one. This thing deals so much freaking damage. It is nuts how much attack it gives you through your max HP. And since Hu Tao actually has the highest base HP from all characters, she reaches insane amounts of attack. She can easily reach 4,000 attack. It's very nuts. This skill has a fine duration, 9 seconds is pretty good for an on-field hyper DPS, and the cooldown is 16 seconds, so it has a higher uptime than the cooldown on the 50-50 cooldown to duration scale. But this also changes a few things into Hu Tao's attacks. Number one, she does attack a bit quicker, and the big thing is that her charge attack comes out quicker. The animation and the delay for the charge attack to come out is actually very much faster. Not only that, with the skill activated, which the state, as the game calls it, is Paramita Papilio, or PP for short. So in the PP state, you can actually notice that Hu Tao's charge attack actually kind of does like a double dash sort of thing. It's pretty weird, and it's also fast as heck. Also, in the PP state, Hu Tao's charge attacks also apply a mark to enemies, just like, and it appears just like Chi-Chi's mark. It's a nice flower. So if charge attacks hit enemies, they apply the Blood Blossom effect. This lasts for 8 seconds, pretty big, and they deal, and this Blood Blossom deals a bit of pyro damage every 4 seconds. It's not crazy damage, but it still is pretty good damage, especially since you have very high attack numbers during the PP state, so the scaling of the Blood Blossom does matter quite, like, it goes really well. This won't really go nuts. It's a nice amount of extra pyro damage. It's mostly used for something like smaller enemies, especially if you have something like in the Abyss, where there's plenty of smaller enemies around you, and there's a big enemy right in the middle, just kind of like floor 10. You can just do one charge attack through the small enemies and let the Blood Blossom kill them while you take down the bigger enemy. So yeah, Blood Blossom is cool, a bit of extra damage, but yeah, the PP state with the charge attack decrease in like the time that it takes to do the charge attack, it's pretty big, and it may, and also Hu Tao's charge attacks have really good ratios. So this makes Hu Tao a very charge attack heavy character. And later on, after we finish with the burst, we'll talk about a bit about constellations, because there's something really big about this, about charge attacks and constellations. But yeah, like, it becomes really crazy how you do your normal attack and then instantly do a charge attack, and that's the maximum amount of DPS you can output. Normal attack once into charge attack, and it's nuts. So yeah, then let's move on to her burst. So Hu Tao's burst is kind of a one and done thing. Hu Tao will do an animation and spin around with her ghost, as the community calls it, Hu Tao, and she will deal a hefty amount of damage and also heal herself. Also, when Hu Tao is below 50% HP, this skill will deal more damage and also heal Hu Tao more. This has a 60 energy cost, which isn't bad. It's fine. And thanks to Hu Tao's teams, she actually gets this up pretty well. Her skill is weird on how it generates energy. It doesn't generate particles. You won't see particles fly around. It's mostly because you're hitting enemies with attacks. Yeah, it's weird, but Hu Tao can sustain herself pretty well on the energy cost. She doesn't need much energy recharge. And this is also a way for Hu Tao to really survive enemies. Even now, with something like the doggies that deal damage through shields, and Hu Tao really likes a shield character into her party, we'll see why later, this ultimate easily allows Hu Tao to self-sustain herself. Also, this effect, the regeneration effect, it doesn't matter how much damage you will deal. The healing comes from how many enemies you will hit. The more enemies, the more heal you will get, up to 5 enemies. This matters a lot when playing Hu Tao, because you do not want to overheal yourself. Once again, we'll see why later. Even through the burst, you can see that being below 50% HP means a bigger damage burst. So it's better to hit around 1 to 3 enemies maximum, depending on what health, where you are in your health percentage, and it matters to be careful. Also, this isn't really a burst to spam, once again, because you do not want to out-heal and go above 50%. The burst also has 15 seconds cooldown. That's fine, it's a burst. Also, it's a one and done thing, so 15 seconds is pretty much fine. This thing just deals absurd amounts of damage. It has very, very high scaling, especially on the low HP damage. And because, once again, you have like 4k attack when on the PP state, this thing hurts like a motherfucker. So yeah, a very, very powerful burst. So let's move on to constellations and talents. And this is where also team management and team compositions come into effect for Hu Tao. So we'll just go and talk about everything here. So Hu Tao's first ascension talent is that whenever your PP state ends, your other party members will get a 12% crit rate increase for 8 seconds, although not Hu Tao herself. This is fine. It's a nice crit rate increase for your supports. It would be extremely, extremely good if it also gave the crit rate bonus to Hu Tao herself. But yeah, I mean, also you wouldn't be able to get a full use of it because 8 seconds is right around your cooldowns. So yeah, like it's nice for Hu Tao's supports and other team members to, have the chance to deal some extra damage through crits. And then Hu Tao's second Ascension talent, this is the very, very, very important one, is that whenever Hu Tao is below 50% of her HP or equal, she will get a 33% pyro damage bonus. This is the big one. This is why you need to keep Hu Tao always below 50% HP, because of this massive, really big pyro damage bonus that the second Ascension talent gives you. It is nuts. 33% pyro damage bonus, and with how elemental damage is calculated into the damage formula, is nuts. And this is why Hu Tao is also very, very specific on her team compositions. Number one, you cannot bring any sort of healing, because any healer will just bring Hu Tao above 50% HP and ruin her damage by a lot. So yeah, and this is also why, number two, you need a shielder. Shields are the very, very easy way to keep Hu Tao, lower than 50% HP and be fine without worrying about dying. And of course, this means that Zhongli is kind of mandatory for Hu Tao. You can't really do much unless you are very, very, very careful with Hu Tao. Because, yeah, unless you have someone like Zhongli, which isn't, he has the strongest shield. He gives you the resistance reduction through his shield. And the big one is the resistance to interruption. Hu Tao needs to use all of her PP state duration as much as she can. And with the resistance to interruption being like right in front of enemies below 50% HP, it is a very, very important thing to have. Some other shielders can kind of work, but the thing is that other shielders aren't exactly for Hu Tao. You can bring in Xinyan. If you build her as a shield bot, that's going to be fine. But, her shield isn't the strongest. It's also a pyro shield, so it's also not that good against non-pyro attacks. And if you're gonna bring Hu Tao, you're not going to go against pyro-resistant enemies or pyro slimes, that are immune. And then the other option is really Thoma. And he is kind of an okay thing for Hu Tao. The thing is that Thoma in general is just utter garbage. You can check my review on him. And yeah, I mean, he's fine, but not the best solution. Once again, he has a pyro shield, which isn't that strong. And again, his shield is just garbage. So he's fine. He's your second best choice from Zhongli. But, he is far from being like Zhongli. And yeah, other shielders, you can't really do much. Like Diona's shields, she's a healer, so you're gonna, completely negate half of her kit. It's sad because Diona also can give a big elemental mastery buff through her ultimate, and her stamina reduction in her ultimate, which would have been so good for Hu Tao. But unfortunately, she heals. She just can't come around. So yeah, a shielder is mandatory. And the one unit that you must, and I mean seriously, must have, and must pair with Hu Tao, is of course the Hydro Archon himself, Xingqiu. Xingqiu is just so good for Hu Tao. He is absolutely perfect. There is nothing, and I mean nothing, to replace Xingqiu. His damage is very good. He is easy to build in artifacts. Emblem of Severed Fate is your best choice right now, but 2 Noblesse and 2 Heart of Depth are also pretty good. Are second best, very close. His artifacts again aren't that hard. It's the classic attack, hydro damage, crit or attack if you want, and maybe energy recharge on the sands. That if you don't have a sacrificial sword, which is the best weapon for Xingqiu right now. So yeah, like he's easy to build, and he just offers the perfect thing for Hu Tao. His rain swords give you a bit of hydro application. I'm talking about the skill here. They have a bit of hydro application when touching enemies, that's fine. But they give you damage reduction, resistance to interruption, and also they do micro healing. And that's the very, very big thing for Hu Tao and Xingqiu, is that Xingqiu isn't a healer, but he micro heals. So even if you don't use Hu Tao's ultimate because of whatever reason it's not available, or there are just too many enemies on the field that if you ult you're gonna overheal, well, Xingqiu's swords just heal you for so little yet so significant amounts for Hu Tao that he's just perfect. You know, a finely built Xingqiu can heal around 5k per 4 swords if you have him above C1. And it's just perfect. Absolutely perfect. And yeah, and Hu Tao in like lower HP states, because Hu Tao's skill takes current HP instead of max HP, because that would have been extremely stupid. The health she takes when you are below 50% HP is around 5 to 10k max. Max. Even lower, like 3000. So Xingqiu's heal just comes exactly to heal what you lost, and almost never gets you above 50%. And then of course he has his ultimate, which has infinite hydro application, very good sub DPS, and it's just perfect for Hu Tao to just vaporize everything. Her normal attacks vaporize, her charge attacks vaporize. It's just nuts. And also Xingqiu vaporizes every attack that Hu Tao does will apply pyro, and allow Xingqiu's other rain swords to vaporize, and that will deal even more damage. And yeah, like Xingqiu is so perfect. Skill does a lot of damage, easy to build, the ultimate is busted, and again, the micro healing with the damage reduction is nuts for Xingqiu. Also, if you want to kind of heal Hu Tao without activating Xingqiu's ultimate, Xingqiu's swords can actually proc through shields. So yeah, if you don't have your ultimate active as Xingqiu, which means that the rain swords cannot break. If you have a shield active like Zhongli and you take a hit, the shield will block the damage, but the rain sword will break, which means that you actually get a bit of a micro heal. And yeah, if you kind of want to heal your characters, perhaps preparing for the next floor of the abyss or something, you can actually use this kind of technique. But yeah, also the thing with Xingqiu is, especially if you're running the sacrificial sword, and you use your skill twice, Xingqiu generates a lot, and I mean a lot of particles. Also, I suggest around a 200 to 220% energy recharge for Xingqiu, which most likely means he will get his ultimate up with 2 E's. But yeah, like Xingqiu's E generates a lot of particles, which easily, like, lightly battery Hu Tao's burst. So yeah, and your other characters even. So Xingqiu is just that perfect, and in a Hu Tao team, he is an absolute must. I'm not joking. He is an absolute must. In order to replace Xingqiu, you must bring a fuck ton of characters. You must bring a Hydro character, someone like Mona who has fine-ish off-field application, and then bring someone like Kazuha or Venti to swirl Hydro and then apply it. And yeah, like Xingqiu is just that perfect and irreplaceable. You can like bring Kazuha and Mona to kind of go for something like a burst team comp, like the one and done, one shot combo, but the meta team isn't that. And that is really Hu Tao's team. It's Zhongli, or a shielder, but mostly Zhongli, Hu Tao herself, and Xingqiu for being the best. Your fourth slot is actually very, very flexible. You can literally bring anything in there. If you're going to bring something like a more DPS character, they are going to lose value, but if they bring something useful, that's fine. Hu Tao is just that much of a hyper character in terms of DPS that even if you have another DPS in that fourth slot and they don't get used, you're still going to melt through enemies like crazy. Sometimes I've brought Diluc because enemies were very scattered in the Abyss, and I can use Diluc to group up enemies with his ultimate and, deal my pyro damage and everything. You also get the pyro resonance, which isn't all that useful for Hu Tao because of she has like the worst base attack. She has 100 base attack, but it's a bit of an extra attack bonus, and if you have a bit of a attack bonus through your substats and your artifacts, I mean, it can kind of scale and give you a fine amount of attack. So yeah, like the pyro resonance isn't all that bad, but yeah, like I bring Diluc, he just throws down an ultimate and that's it. Groups enemies up, Xingqiu and Hu Tao just take care of everything. You can bring in an ammo unit, of course, bring Kazuha to just delete enemies with his elemental damage increase, right? He can group up enemies perfectly. And yeah, also, of course, he carries Viridescent, which is perfect. You can also bring Venti. It's going to be a bit harder to hit enemies through Venti's ultimate, but he's also a carrier of Viridescent. He does shred resistances on his own with his ultimate. Very good. So yeah, Anemo units can also work, although you can't exactly bring in someone like Sayu is, not that good, or Jun, because they heal, and you can't bring healers into a Hu Tao team. Like Hydro characters, the only thing you can do is bring Mona, and she will offer a good increase in damage through her ultimate. But again, Mona is mostly for like one-shot compositions, but again, she can work if you don't have anyone extra to bring in. The big one though, and the most meta out of them all, is another Geo character, and specifically Albedo. So double Geo means you have the Geo Resonance, which means even more resistance shred, also a bit of extra shield strength, and I mean, it's just, this team is the meta one for Hu Tao. Zhongli comes in for the shred, for Geo, Pyro, and the shield. Hu Tao is the hyper DPS, of course. Xingqiu I've already explained, and then here comes Albedo with his off-field Geo damage that won't really take off Xingqiu's Hydro application, not at all. And yeah, he's just a perfect sub DPS that doesn't ruin Hu Tao's attacks, and he allows you to have the Geo Resonance. He also brings Elemental Mastery, because when activating his ultimate, you give Elemental Mastery to your party, and Hu Tao being a Vaporized Master with Xingqiu, that Elemental Mastery, and especially 120 that Albedo brings, is just busted. Literally busted. And yeah, that's the meta team. The Geo Resonance, Sub DPS Xingqiu and Albedo, Elemental Mastery from Albedo, Hydro Application from Xingqiu, it just goes nuts. So yeah, but you can also bring other Geos. The Geo Traveler isn't bad at all. He has fine sub DPS by just pressing his skill, and his ultimate also brings crit rate. He does give you a bit of crit rate while inside of the ultimate, so that's fine for bringing in, having the Geo Resonance, bit of crit rate, bit of sub DPS, perfectly fine. Ningyan can also be kind of fine. Her wall generates a good amount of particles to kind of battery herself and Zhongli a bit, and very likely your other teammates like Xingqiu or Hu Tao. But she brings a lot of DPS through her burst and the wall as well. She's fine enough. There's also Ito right now. He's fine. I use him just because I want to roll for Ito, and I mostly use him for the Geo Resonance, and because Hu Tao's cooldowns with Xingqiu, they're kind of misaligned, unfortunately, because Xingqiu does have a bit higher cooldowns. You can just go with Ito and just use your ultimate, use your E because it deals a lot of damage with the ultimate activated, and don't waste a lot of uptime with Ito and just do a nuke with Geo damage, and that's all. Just bring another Geo character for the Geo Resonance mostly. That's why I bring him. Again, it's not meta, but but nobody will scold you, for bringing into a Hu Tao team just to have a bit of, let's say, sub DPS time, and again the Geo Resonance. So yeah, in terms of artifacts for Hu Tao, you have a bit of choices actually. Well, two mostly. Crimson Witch is of course the best one because of the extra pyro damage bonus and the extra reaction damage. Plus, Hu Tao can't exactly really use Crimson Witch to its full effect with the 3 stacks of extra pyro damage, but even the extra 7% she will actually get from activating her skill is pretty good enough for Hu Tao. But also you can go for something like Wanderer's Troop for the 80 Elemental Mastery. The 80 Elemental Mastery that Wanderers gives you is actually exactly equal to the extra reaction damage that Crimson Witch gives you, especially for Vaporize. And because of that, you can change between Wanderer's Troop or a 4-piece Crimson Witch set, depending on your substats. If your Wanderer's Troop are so like jacked up in substats compared to your Crimson Witch, you can go for a 2-piece Crimson Witch, 2-piece Wanderer's Troop, and you will achieve better results than using a 4-piece Crimson Witch. Else, there isn't really much. The Tenacity of the Millilith isn't really that noteworthy with the extra 20% HP. It is a good amount, but it lacks. It really drags behind Wanderer's Troop or a full piece Crimson Witch. But the other one that can achieve higher results than the Crimson Witch is the Shimenawa set. Now, with Shimenawa, it's pretty weird. If you don't know, the 2-piece gives you 18% attack, which is pretty useless on Hu Tao, but it's okay. A pat in the back on an attack bonus. But the effect is that if you have 15 or more energy, and you use your skill, you will drain that energy and increase your normal and charge attack damage by like 50%, which is a massive boost. It is an incredibly big boost, and since, as we said, like Hu Tao really, really likes charge attacks, it increases her damage by a lot, but it limits Hu Tao's burst a lot as well. And because Hu Tao's burst can deal like insane amounts of damage, I'm sure you have seen, like, I hit 1 million damage on Hu Tao, even though they went like level 70 enemies. But against like fully leveled enemies, she can easily just deal 165,000 or 150,000 on average. And that's a lot, and a lot of damage. Even if you slightly overheal Hu Tao with that burst, if you usually activate your burst during the end or close to the end of your PP state, even overhealing won't change a thing, because once you're back up, you'll just activate your skill and go back down. But yeah, like, her burst offers a lot and a lot of damage, and losing that with Shimenawa, it's a trait that you will need to get used to. And again, I think that it's kind of not worth like learning the new playstyle, let's say. If you've already farmed Crimson Witch or Wanderer's Troop and you're fine with that, do not go for Shimenawa. It's not worth it unless you really, really want to see how Shimenawa plays into Hu Tao. The good thing, though, is that by farming Shimenawa, you also farm Emblem of Severed Fate for Xingqiu, so it is quite, let's say, resin effective, resin cost effective, but again, like, it's a mixed bag. If it doesn't outperform Crimson Witch or Wanderer's Troop, it falls pretty behind it. So yeah, like, it's a weird mix. It's not necessarily meta. It's an alternative that it's kind of hard. So yes, that is for artifacts. In terms of stats for artifacts, HP is your sans no matter what. You can also go for Elemental Mastery. If you think that your HP is plentiful enough, you can also go with Elemental Mastery. I would suggest going for Elemental Mastery if you have like the really, really good weapons. We'll talk about them in a small bit. But yeah, like, Elemental Mastery is an alternative to HP in terms of sans. But to be honest, with recent experiences trying to farm for Kazuha, Elemental Mastery is absolutely cancer to farm, and the chances of getting good substats on that Elemental Mastery sense is nigh on impossible. Like, it's really hard to farm a good Elemental Mastery sense. You're going to be very, very lucky. I suggest just trying your luck with HP artifacts. But Elemental Mastery can also be very, very good and out-damage HP, but again, it's really, really hard to farm. Pyro damage, of course, for your cup, and then crit rate, crit damage on your circlet, depending on what weapon you have. I have kind of tried to use HP circlets with, like, jacked to the max stats. It actually kind of reaches, like, the crit circlets, depending on the weapon you're using, but it's not really worth it. I mean, you can try it just for fun, but it's not recommended at all, you know. But if you want to try your luck and have like an HP artifact that is just absolutely nuts in terms of crit stats, then maybe you can try your luck and just have some fun with an HP, you know, being jacked up to HP. And speaking of that, this has to do with the weapons a bit, but I would like to mention it now. Because of artifacts. HP, it is kind of limiting to Hu Tao as well, because your PP state can convert a maximum amount of HP to attack, specifically 400% of your base attack, which means that if you have a weapon with lower base attack, you do have a limit to how much HP you can get on Hu Tao, which will mean that you can't convert more of your max HP to attack. Again, this only happens with really low base attack weapons, so 3 stars and some 4 stars, but it is something to consider. It's fine, like, doing some calculations with something like a 450 base attack weapon, which is something like the Deathmatch. Like 35,000 is the maximum amount, and to reach that, it isn't all that hard with Hu Tao, but it's not like something you can do every day, let's say. So yeah, like, do keep that in mind if you're going to use a low base attack weapon, but still, you know, just have this in your mind, that's all. For higher base attack weapons, especially 500 plus, it won't really matter. Like, that limit goes 40,000 and above, and there's no way to reach that, you know. And for substats for artifacts, crit is of course the big one. HP is also good. Energy recharge, not so much, because again, she doesn't really need the cost. 60 is fine. Hu Tao with the Jingshu do battery pretty well. Hu Tao's burst. The big one though, instead of HP percent, I would say Elemental Mastery matters a lot when you're vaping so much with Hu Tao. So Elemental Mastery is very, very equal to HP percent when it comes to Hu Tao substats. So I usually don't talk about constellations, especially on 5 stars, but for Hu Tao, there's always one freaking discussion that always pops up. It is C1 or Homa, and I mean, we really, really need to talk about her C1, and I want to mention her C2 as well. So, what is her Constellation 1? So, Hu Tao's first constellation makes it so whenever you're in your PP state, your charge attacks do not consume stamina. And this is a very big one. So, I haven't talked about this big thing about Hu Tao until now. So, Hu Tao's playstyle, whenever she is on the field and activates PP state, is as follows. You do a normal attack, and then you do a charge attack, and you must cancel this attack. The easiest way to cancel an attack is by jumping. It does need a bit of practicing, and you need to do it quite early, and the increase in speed of charge attacks that PP state gives you makes it easier and harder. Again, you need to get used to it, and you can't exactly practice with other characters because, again, this speed increase. But yeah, like, you need to normal attack, charge attack, and then just immediately jump almost in order to cancel the charge attack. The thing is that you cancel the dash forward, the skewer through enemies, which could easily misposition you, and then you need to dash and waste more stamina. And also, it makes it so that the animation ends right there, or sometimes doesn't even play, which is very, very hard to do. But with that, like you can throw a lot of normal and charge attacks while PP state is on before its duration ends. And that's the big thing about canceling your charge attacks. It's about not consuming stamina through sprinting because you mispositioned, because you went through an enemy, and to maximize the amount of charge attacks you can do in your PP state. With C1 though, because charge attacks do not consume stamina, comes dash canceling, where you dash in order to cancel attacks. It's the same. It is a bit harder to do than than jump canceling, but it's fine, and they are kind of same in difficulty. But again, you get used to both of them depending on if you have C1 or not. Like jump canceling when having this isn't as efficient, so don't think about not wasting stamina at all, by the way. But the thing is that the dash has kind of a buffer, so you might actually need to do 2 normal attacks instead of 1 normal attack with Hu Tao before charge attacking, because again, there is a bit of a cooldown to sprints, if you have noticed. So yeah, this is a big one. Matters a lot in terms of stamina consumption, and even through your party. If you needed to dash to cancel some of Xingqiu's animations, or Zhongli's animations, or your other characters' animations that you have on the 4th slot, it can matter a lot when you reach half stamina and you switch to Hu Tao and then start your combo and you don't have C1 and you threw less charge attacks. So yeah, big one. And also want to talk about her C2. Her C2 makes it so that your Blood Blossom actually gets an HP percent like bonus, where it deals extra damage based on 10% of Hu Tao's max HP, and also your ultimate will also apply Blood Blossom on the enemies, whether or not you have PP state on or off. This is pretty good. Like, it makes Blood Blossom an actually very big damage dealer, and I mean, if you have like 35,000 HP, it's going to deal an extra 3,500, which might not sound a lot, but it can easily finish an enemy. You know, previously Blood Blossom is only for smaller enemies. This can make Blood Blossom work on kind of bigger enemies, like kind of Ruin Guards, like some of the Mirror Maiden, not necessarily Mirror Maiden, but the Season Mages, maybe the Fatui agents, those guys. Like, it can make those, it can really kill those if they're like 10 to 20% HP. Like, this C2 makes Blood Blossom quite powerful, though it's not worth getting. You never hear C2 or Homa. It's always C1 or Homa, and indeed, C1 changes a lot. C2 is a nice damage increase. It's not though worth to really like sprint for it and waste your Primo Gems. C1 is fine. C2 is just a really good damage increase, but not all that worth it. So then, and I mean, there's also C6. It's a very weird one where Hu Tao doesn't die and then she just goes nuts with damage. It's nice, it's cool, but it's not really something that people talk about. So let's move on to weapons. There are a few 3-star mentions, actually. You might hear people talk about Black Tassel. This thing has an HP percent substat, and the abilities that you deal extra damage to slimes. Oh, yahoo. The thing is that, as we said, because of the restriction of the 400% base attack to HP to base attack conversion, because Black Tassel has very low base attack because it's a 3-star weapon, and with the HP percent substat, you can actually reach this limit. So I wouldn't recommend Black Tassel. Even if it sounds good, it's not that recommended. The White Tassel, on the other hand, which is actually kind of rare because I think it's only found in chests, is kind of good. It falls behind basically every other option, but for early game, or if you are that unlucky with weapons, it is a fine enough option. 39 base attack doesn't really matter. It gives a good amount of crit rate, and then it increases your normal attack damage by a very good amount, 24 on R1, but you're always going to have this on R5. It's fine. this does give you a bit of normal attack damage. The crit rate is mostly what matters. Again, for a 3-star option, it's cool, but again, it lacks behind everything else. And then let's move on to 4 stars. The Black Cliff Pole isn't that recommended. The only reason to use the Black Cliff Pole is to balance crit rate and crit damage, and if you have literally nothing else on the list, no billets if you wasted them elsewhere or someone else is using a spear, it's not that good. Only for the crit damage, but I wouldn't really waste my star glitter on Black Cliff if I'm gonna give it to Hu Tao. Give it to Xiao, but not really Hu Tao. So yeah, not that much recommended. The Crescent Pike, it gives physical damage, so that's not, you can't. The Deathmatch isn't all that bad. Its low base attack is kind of a limiting factor, but again, to reach the amount of HP, which is around 35,000, you're going to need very, very good HP substats on your artifacts. So don't go all that crazy because Deathmatch has such a low base attack. It gives a good amount of crit rate, and that's the main reason why you would get it. It is a battle pass item as well, so it's not necessarily all that free to play. But yeah, it's cool. A lot of crit rate just to balance crit rate and crit damage, and the effect is easier to activate than the Black Cliff. And it's fine. I mean, hey, a bit of extra attack. The def is not really important, but Deathmatch is very much recommended. It is kind of a baseline when it comes to calculations, just for the stats alone, just for the crit rate alone, literally. Although Hu Tao does have crit damage ascensions, so it is easy to balance her stats even, a bit easier. Dragon's Bane, a very, very big contender on one of the best weapons for Hu Tao, because it gives a lot of elemental mastery and then increases damage against enemies affected by Hydro or Pyro by 20%. A massive damage buff on R1, and it's Hydro or Pyro. Well, Hu Tao is Pyro. She has Xingqiu as her mandatory buddy. Dragon's Bane is basically always on. It's good. It might become a bit harder to balance out crit stats, because of the elemental mastery buff, but the substat, but it's really, really good. I don't know if I would recommend it on R1 compared to something like Deathmatch, especially because of the ease of the stat balancing. But R2 and above, and especially R5, this thing's damage can easily just delete any other 4-star polearms and rival 5 stars. So if you have a high refinement Dragon's Bane and your Jianling, I guess, isn't using it, you can easily and very, very, very recommended use it on Hu Tao. And I mean, it's not recommended to refine Deathmatch. So if your gacha luck is good and you got yourself multiple Dragon's Banes, then yeah, use it on Hu Tao. For me, I have only one, but I also have Homa. The Lithic Spear, not a bad choice for Hu Tao. Very big base attack, doesn't really matter all that much. The attack percent substat isn't all that crazy. And the effect is the attack and crit rate increase based on characters from Liyue. Well then, Hu Tao is from Liyue, so she gets 1 stack. Xingqiu, who again is mandatory, is also from Liyue, so he gives 2 stacks. And then Zhongli is also from Liyue, so he also gives a stack. So basically with the Lithic Spear, you almost have always 3 stacks. And if you find yourself some other random ass Liyue character to throw in the party, I mean, I mentioned Ningyan, of course, or Yunjin. Yunjin just came out, she can also perhaps help a bit with Hu Tao and being a G-Resonance character. She can be, Lithic Spear gives you 4 full stacks. Once again, wouldn't recommend it compared to Deathmatch or Dragon's Bane on R1, but high refinements, especially at max, very good to balance out crit rate and crit damage. And the attack increase, right, it becomes pretty substantial on high refinements and with 4 stacks. So, and with a high base attack that Lithic Spear has, it will actually matter. Those attack percents will matter. So, again, high refinement, would recommend it. Low refinement, not so much over Dragon's Bane or Deathmatch. The prototype Star Glitter, it's the kind of best sort of ish um, recommendation. Um, Base attack doesn't matter. It gives energy recharge, which also doesn't matter. The effect is kind of nice. When you activate your normal skill, your elemental skill, your normal and charge attack damage increases. It does have 2 stacks, which hurts Hu Tao because she can't activate her skill twice. But that normal and charge attack damage, it's pretty big. I wouldn't recommend like making more, wasting your billets more on the prototype Star Glitter if you're using it on Hu Tao. But for early game, and if your gacha luck and if you're going free to play is not all that good, yeah, prototype Star Glitter can work pretty well. The Favonius Lance, it's a lot of energy recharge, and the effect is about energy, and Hu Tao doesn't need energy, so no. Dragon Spine Spear also is about physical damage, no. The Catane Cross Spear, though, it is a contender in a way. It has very high base attack, more than the prototype Star Glitter, and it gives elemental mastery. Very much lower than Dragon's Bane. And the effect doesn't help Hu Tao because it gives skill damage, and Hu Tao's infused attacks don't count as skill damage, right? It has a bit of an energy recharge effect, generation effect, but nevertheless, the high base attack and elemental mastery that the Catane Cross Spear give are pretty much fine for Hu Tao. You don't have deathmatch because you don't want to pay. Don't waste your Star Glitter on the Black Cliff. You have no other spears that fit Hu Tao. You craft one Catane Cross Spear and give it to Hu Tao, and you are fine. The Elemental Mastery is a very good substat for Hu Tao. It's fine. The catch, unfortunately, isn't all that much. I might kind of use the catch on one-shot compositions. If you don't have the Dragon's Bane, I would suggest the Dragon's Bane more on one-shot like team comps. But the catch is a very big free-to-play R5 thing that increases burst damage and crit rate. So it's fine if you don't have Raiden, you don't use Yan Link, and you just want to one-shot something with Hu Tao. But that's literally all it. And then Wave Breaker's Fin, which is the Inazuma Spear that you get from the gacha, also isn't for Hu Tao. It increases elemental burst damage depending on like the energy needed from your party. It has high base attack, low attack percent. Like anything that this thing gives is just very low priority for Hu Tao. So it's not really. I don't recommend it all that much. So let's move on to 5 stars. These bad boys could have a bit of contention. Vortex Vanquisher. Thank fuck it's coming back. It's fine. You always run a shielder with Hu Tao, so the effect of Vortex Vanquisher can be easily triggered. Okay, base attack in terms of like, looking at the other 5 stars, very, very high attack percent substat. Increases shield strength, so that's good if you have a kind of a weaker Zhongli or another shielder in your party. And then, of course, the effect is all about giving you attack percent, and then if you have a shield, it doubles the effect. It is pretty fine for Hu Tao. Zhongli, again, is mostly always on a Hu Tao team, and with the absolute incredible amount that this thing will give you in terms of attack, it's fine. Is it better than a high refinement Dragon's Bane? Not so much. But R1 or R2 Dragon's Bane, or low refinement, R1 mostly deathmatch, Vortex Vanquisher, even on R1, will out-damage them most of the time, so it's fine. It's okay when it comes to visuals, I would say, but it's fine. Next, the Jade Spear. It's also fine. Very high base attack, which is okay for Hu Tao. The crit rate, though, that it gives is pretty substantial. It is cool. It is actually kind of lower than Deathmatch, but the effect also in the stats, because of the base attack that it has as a 5-star weapon, it's fine. The effect is kind of meh to trigger with Hu Tao, but you won't use Jade Spear's effect fully on your PP state. You mostly will get it close to the end. But it still is a pretty substantial amount of attack. So, and when you have maximum stacks, you increase general damage instead of just attack like Vortex Vanquisher. So it is basically the second place when it comes to 5 stars, behind, of course, the one we'll see in a bit. Skyward Spine, it's not really worth it. It has very high base attack, but it gives energy recharge, which Hu Tao doesn't need. It gives a very low amount of crit rate in its effect, and it also has a bit of an attack speed, normal attack speed, which is a very rare effect to see on Genshin Impact, but it's not that good. Again, I would kind of recommend it just because of its stats and 5-star appeal over an R1 Dragon's Bane or Deathmatch. And maybe if you have a Skyward Spine a bit higher on refinements, if you gotten it from the standard banner or weapons banner, if Skyward Spine is R1, R2, and your other weapons are R1, you can use Skyward Spine. It's not going to be the best, but it's okay, but it really doesn't do much. And then the big bad boy is the Staff of Homa. It is Hu Tao's signature weapon. I mean, what can I say? It is tailor-made for her. The base attack is fine. It's 46, which means that the limit for the PP state conversion is pretty high, like 40,000 plus. So you don't need to really care about all that much. Lots and lots of crit damage as the substat, which helps a lot with balancing out stats and just getting a lot of crit damage. My Hu Tao has like 70 plus to 220 crit damage. Like, it's nuts. Passively increases HP, so that's awesome if your artifacts don't have tons of HP percent. So that's awesome. And then, of course, it provides attack bonuses based on your max HP, and while below 50% HP, which is exactly what Hu Tao does, the attack bonus increases. It's tailor-made for Hu Tao, is her best weapon. There's no freaking way to out-damage this thing. Even an R5 Dragon's Bane cannot touch an R1 Staff of Homa below 50%. And I mean, what can you do? The Engulfing Lightning isn't at all for Hu Tao, I would say. Like, okay, base attack as 5-star, gives a lot of energy recharge, which Hu Tao doesn't need, and then the attack increase based on the energy recharge is not needed. So don't freaking use Engulfing Lightning on Hu Tao. There's also the new Calamity Queller that's about to go out with the Shenhe banner. It's meh. Has incredibly high base attack and very low attack percent as substat, so that's kind of And the effect is okay. A bit of elemental damage, which is fine for Hu Tao, that's good. And then when you use your elemental skill, you gain attack every second. That's kind of okay. Because of the high base attack the weapon has, that attack percent is actually pretty good. And then unfortunately, though, the other part of the effect is that the character needs to be off-field for the attack increase to be doubled, which isn't something that Hu Tao does because she's always on the field. I mean, Calamity Queller is fine. I mean, compared to something like Vortex Vanquisher or Skyward Spine, it might rank similarly, but I think it easily gets out-damaged by the Jade Spear or Homa. And even Skyward Spine or Vortex Vanquisher on higher refinements, especially Skyward Spine. So, it's fine. I wouldn't say it fits Hu Tao all that much. Wouldn't use it above a high refinement Dragon's Bane, or maybe even Deathmatch because of the stats. But yeah, like, it's fine. So, that's it. Pretty lengthy, but there's a lot to talk about Hu Tao. She still remains one of the top DPSs, especially single target, and kind of more if you group up enemies, especially with someone like Kazuha for smaller enemies or Venti, or just bring in enemies closer if they're bigger. You can hit more, even with charge attacks. And she is pretty cool. Many people roll for her because of the insane amount of damage. She is an absolute queen right now with the Spiral Abyss that's on. And a lot, of course, also roll for her because of her, because of her personality. She's pretty crazy, I would say. She's voiced by the one and only Rie Takahashi, And I mean, she is beautiful. She does a perfect voice, I would say. And I mean, I'm showing you, the intro and outro, and she plays her, idle animations, and I bet you it's the whole thing about pictures you can hear, because she never shuts the fuck up, and also is very, very unique in her voice lines. I mean, can't say any other things. So yeah, that is it for Hu Tao. Very much recommended. C1 or Homa? I went for Homa. I got fucking fucked completely by John. I'm gonna burn her office. I have a C4 John because I lost all of my 50-50s on the Hu Tao banner. I'm gonna burn her office, as I said. And I could have had a C1 Hu Tao. Fuck you, John. I got Homa on the wish thingy. I had to get three weapons, so I got the Elegy of the End. I'm gonna stick it in my ass because I don't have Venti, nor I'm gonna use Amber as a support. And I also got Skyward Blade though out of that, so I gave that to my Bennett. But yeah, I suggest Homa instead of C1. And yeah, that is it for Hu Tao. See you next for most likely Aratakito. Goodbye.